This changes everything. Gwen Brown's voice shook, ringing out in the cavernous courtroom like a warning bell. All heads turned toward her, some inquisitive, others doubting, and some with anticipation. Today was not ordinary routine hearing day. No, this was the day-long suppressed secrets of the Brown family. Secrets concealed under layers of loyalty, trust, and implied tension would come out. Her hands were clammy, her heart pounded wildly, and yet, somewhere within, she recognized that she had no option but to weather the storm. The courtroom itself felt attuned to the tension, its high ceilings bouncing back every step, every whisper, every nervous breath. The aroma of waxed wood blended with the faint whiffs of coffee from the jury room, while the soft buzz of fluorescent lights above hung in the air in a sterile but heavy environment. The judge's gavel struck the wood desk sharply, at once silencing the room. Cameramen from media pools clicked away, taking in every fleeting emotion of the family members, every drop of perspiration, every twitch of anxiety. Cody Brown sat quietly in the gallery, his back stiff, his gaze straight ahead. Gwen sensed the strain emanating from him, as if an inner storm was seething to burst. There had been many a challenge to confront the couple over the years, but today's burden of the accusations weighed more heavily than anything she had ever known. For the first time, Gwen experienced the full brunt of being in the public eye, not only as a member of a public family, but as a human being ensnared in a network of lies, betrayal, and possible shame. The cross-examining lawyer, a man notorious for his merciless courtroom tactics, came forward. His gaze bristled with the type of calculative cunning that left veteran witnesses break out in cold sweat. "Miss Brown," he started, his tone suave yet biting, "you say you knew nothing about the lost family money, but these documents signed and attested indicate something else. Can you clarify this?" Gwen swallowed hard. Her throat was dry as though sandpaper had taken the place of her vocal cords. The room closed in on her, the walls pressing in with each beat of her heart. All eyes in the courtroom were upon her now, and she felt naked, defenseless. Her past, her loyalty, and what she had put her trust in were all going to be questioned, examined, and torn apart before the very people she knew. Her thoughts flew, attempting to remember every detail, every word, every moment which might save her or betray her. She remembered the nights spent worrying about family money, the hushed conversations in hidden rooms, the times she had decided to trust individuals who maybe did not deserve it. Every memory weighed upon her chest like a heavy stone, but she knew she had to talk, to make them realize. The room was an assortment of sentiments. There were some who displayed sympathy, others curiosity, and then some, especially those who had doubted her since day one, full of anticipation, as though they were expecting her to fail. Cameras from all sides filmed every minute detail, the jerk of her hand, the anxious look at Cody, the faint increase in her chest as she gulped in air. The judge, a strict man with a reputation for fairness but unshakable authority, looked over his spectacles. His eyes were firm, but gentle, like a beacon in a storm. "Miss Brown," he spoke slowly, "the court demands absolute honesty. Everything is important. You will be able to explain yourself fully." Gwen nodded, although the movement was heavier than it looked. This wasn't simply about providing answers. It was about uncovering a hidden truth, a truth that would potentially destroy reputations, relationships, and even the tenuous balance of trust within the family. Her mind sparked to Cody again. He hadn't said a word since he walked into the courtroom, but his presence was a silent anchor. She had seen him handle many crises with calm precision, yet today, even he seemed tense, a slight furrow on his brow betraying his concern. Whatever happened in this courtroom wasn't just going to affect her. It could ripple through the whole family and leave possibly permanent scars. The defense lawyer huddled in, setting down a hefty folder with a distinct thud. The echo seemed to reverberate throughout the room, commanding every pair of ears to the evidence. "These reports," he tapped the folder, "list financial dealings that contradict the statements you've made. The court has a reason to suppose someone is not telling the truth." Gwen's stomach rolled over. She had known the papers were there, had glimpsed them all when they were filed weeks before, but the sheer magnitude of them now, in a full courtroom, was nearly crushingly oppressive. Each gaze in the room appeared to puncture her, watching, judging, anticipating. She gripped her fists under the table, attempting to stabilize herself, attempting to call upon the same resolve that had gotten her through every trial of her life so far. She drew a slow, measured breath, telling herself to concentrate. This was her time to speak, to explain, to set out what she knew was true. "Your Honor," she started, her voice shaking a little at first, but growing more confident as she went on. "I have always been in good faith. I did not know of these inconsistencies until recently. I trusted others around me, and I trusted in the honesty of the information presented to me. However, I have since found proof that indicates that somebody actively lied to me and others. I am here today to share what I do know, and to make sure the truth comes out." There was a hush in the courtroom. Even the opposing lawyer stopped, shocked by the sudden definiteness and belief in her tone of voice. A spark of determination flared within Gwen. This was no longer about defending herself. It was about revealing the lies and deception that had put not just her reputation but the honor of the entire family at stake. The judge slowly nodded, a low-key recognition of her bravery. "Go on, Miss Brown. Put the evidence forward you have." As she started to map out the chronology, recounting discussions, meetings, and exchanges, Gwen observed subtle changes in the court. Individuals who had appeared doubtful were inclining forward, ears tuned in. Cody's demeanor relaxed a fraction, a minor but heartening indication that he trusted her. Even the jury, a group of regular people who had heard hundreds of testimonies, appeared mesmerized by the depth and emotion of her testimony. Time stretched. Every word Gwen uttered was a stone cast into a quiet pond, the waves spreading further than she could expect. The tension which had been overwhelming started to become anticipation. Every member of the courtroom knew that something historic was about to happen, that what Gwen was taking them towards would make their world shake as it struggled to accommodate what it now knew about the Brown family. And just as she was going to continue, the doors to the courtroom swung open. A breathless young courier approached the judge and handed him a thick envelope. Everybody jumped in surprise. Cameras were flashing. The judge held up an eyebrow, suspending mid-sentence. "What is this?" he demanded, brandishing the envelope. Gwen's heart leapt. There was a combination of fear and anticipation that coursed through her. Whatever was in that envelope had the potential to turn everything around she had just started to reveal. She looked at Cody, now seriously worried. The room was holding its collective breath. The other lawyer's assertive confidence stumbled for the first time. He had anticipated a run-of-the-mill cross-exam, a cliched defense. Now he found himself confronted with the unknown, uncertainty, and a possible reversal that could destroy all his preparations. The judge opened the envelope with care, drawing out photographs, declarations, and messages. Each detail was examined, each line analyzed. Gwen's mind was reeling. She had expected some of it, had known some of it, but the sheer extent of it, the magnitude, the reach, the implications was overwhelming. She breathed in deeply, centering herself. "Your Honor," she spoke, her voice firm and determined, even though hurricane winds swirled within her. "I am prepared to lay the entire truth before you. It will indicate not only where I am but also the unseen powers that have moved behind this situation. The court has a right to see the entire picture." As she spoke, the courtroom leaned forward with her, held in thrall. The tension had coalesced into something palpable, a blend of suspense, anticipation, and heavy burden of unspoken truths about to be shared. Gwen knew that this was just the start. What ensued would decide not just her own fate but the fate of us all. Her voice rang, firm and unshakable. "It is time the truth comes out." And on that the game was afoot. The Brown family's hidden secrets, buried under decades of loyalty and deception, were soon to be revealed. The courtroom air was heavy with anticipation, almost charged. Each whisper, each rustle of papers, and each muffled cough was magnified to hearing, as if the walls themselves were breathing silently. Gwen Brown sat stiffly, her back straight, attempting to still the shake in her hands. She knew that the next few minutes would not only decide her own destiny, but the destiny of everyone present. The prosecutor, picking up on her anxiousness, hunched forward with a hungry smile. His eyes sparkled like metal in the cruel glare of the courtroom. "Miss Brown," he started, his voice reassuringly even, "let's review the facts again. You were solely in charge of keeping track of the family accounts, right?" Gwen's heart lurched. She had never truly been solely responsible before, but the wording in the law could turn her words against her far too easily. She looked at him squarely. "I was responsible for supervision, yes," she said cautiously. "But there were several layers of management. I did what I was told and what I thought was best, based on the information and advice I was provided. I had no reason to suspect anything improper until recently." A murmur worked its way through the courtroom. A few of the jury leaned forward, obviously interested. Even Cody's normally impassive face showed a flash of concern. Gwen could feel their eyes weighing her down, the unspoken judgment that hung in the air. She gripped her fists under the table, willing herself to concentrate on the truth. The opposing lawyer smirked. "Interesting," he said. "You didn't know that deals worth thousands of dollars were being redirected? That checks were authorized under your signature without your approval?" Gwen shivered with cold. Yes, the transactions had occurred, but she wasn't at fault. Someone was falsifying the accounts, planting the evidence deep, and counting on her trust. She breathed deeply, grounding herself. "I trusted the people in charge of the accounts, but I have since found evidence of deliberate misconduct. I did not authorize, condone, or profit from any wrongdoing." The courtroom seemed to react to her words. The judge's stern gaze softened slightly, as if acknowledging the sincerity in her tone. The jury, previously skeptical, now appeared thoughtful, nodding subtly. Then, before the attorney could open his mouth to carry on his assault, the courtroom doors burst open with a violence that caused everyone to jump. A young messenger hurried in, clutching a heavy envelope, slightly breathless. Cameras clicked right away, flashing lights that temporarily blinded the room. The judge reached for the envelope, his face impassive. "What is this?" he demanded, holding it high. The courtroom was quiet. Gwen felt a knot in her stomach. She had a feeling that whatever was in it could throw everything off course. The other lawyer's smug smile wavered. He had been prepared to steamroll over this testimony, but now he was up against the unknown. He glanced at the judge, then at Gwen, a fleeting flicker of anxiety crossing his brow. The judge slowly opened the envelope. It contained photographs, text messages, and intricate financial records. Each eye in the courtroom moved between the judge, Gwen, and the papers. The documents indicated a degree of manipulation that no one had anticipated. It wasn't merely money missing. It was an entanglement of lies, betrayals, and backroom dealings meant to deceive, not just Gwen but the entire family. Gwen's heart raced. She knew some of the evidence messages she'd seen fleetingly, documents she'd caught a glimpse of, but laid out so starkly in front of everyone, it was almost too much to take. Her hands began to sweat, but she pushed herself on. "Your Honor," she stated, standing with caution, "this proof substantiates what I believed. There has been intentional deception, intended to deceive not only me but the family as well. I have followed the transactions and the communication to the responsible party, and I am ready to provide this information to the court." The courtroom fell silent. Cameras snapped wildly, snapping each word and nuance. The jury also leaned forward, intrigued. Cody's eyes softened, and for a moment Gwen saw the flash of pride in his eyes. Even the opposing attorney, who now visibly strained, was caught off guard. The judge nodded slowly. "Miss Brown, the court will permit you to go ahead. Argue your evidence diligently and concisely. The court anticipates accuracy and integrity." Gwen took a deep breath. She started explaining the timeline, carefully explaining every suspicious transaction, each secretive meeting, and each hushed conversation she had overheard. With every word she spoke, they added depth to the story, unveiling a web of manipulation and lies that had been skillfully hidden from the family. As she spoke, tensions in the room became palpable. People leaned in, their eyes on her every movement. The opposing lawyer attempted to interrupt, but the judge held up a hand, stilling him. "Let her proceed. The court requires clarity." Gwen's voice, at first tremulous, became firmer with every word. She knew that this was more than a defense. It was a statement. She was no longer defending herself. She was revealing the truth, showing the secret powers that had been undermining her and the family all along. The images she exhibited revealed financial records with minute changes, messages erased and concealed, and people working in the background to erase their marks. All of the evidence she showed revealed a clear image. Gwen had been coerced, not careless. She had been used as a pawn in a skillfully planned game. The jury listened, enthralled. Even the opposing lawyer, now obviously agitated, was unable to hide his increasing worry. Gwen saw the little things, the fidget of his fingers, as he realized that the court would not necessarily accept the story the way he wanted it to. The faint furrowing of his brow. The courtroom scales were tilting, and Gwen felt it. She hesitated for a second, allowing the gravity of the evidence to settle in. The room was still, the type of stillness before a storm breaks. Your Honor, she went on, I trusted individuals I ought to have been more wary of. I have, however, pursued the trail, confirmed the facts, and am prepared to demonstrate to the court the complete truth. It is now time to unmask who is really accountable. The judge nodded once more, and Gwen noticed the jurors looking at each other. The tension had shifted from expectance to suspense. Everybody was aware that something historic was going to transpire, and nobody was able to anticipate the result. For Gwen, the terror had not gone away, but it had become resolve. She was no longer responding. She was driving the courtroom down a path of deception, revealing the truth bit by bit. And in that moment she understood something key. However this played out, she was no longer along for the ride. She was in command, and that command empowered her. As the day was wrapping up, the judge warned everyone present that evidence would be scrutinized to the fullest and proceedings would resume the next day. Cameras recorded Gwen sauntering back to her chair, head held high, with her heart pounding. She had weathered the first onslaught of examination. The tempest raged on, but she had taken the first decisive step. Outside the courtroom, the press had a field day speculating about the unfolding story. The headlines would soon shout about trickery, betrayal, and the unveiling of secrets within the Brown clan. Gwen experienced a combination of fear and determination. She recognized that the journey ahead would be tough, but she also recognized that she had set things in motion in her pursuit of justice, and in unraveling the truth that had lain hidden for so long. The courtroom waited with bated breath. The envelope that had arrived earlier was perched on the judge's desk like a time bomb, its contents poised to destroy years of carefully guarded secrets. Gwen Brown's hands were still sweaty, but a spark of defiance had taken over the fear that had first overcome her. She was aware that in these pages and photos was the key to telling the truth and unmasking the true mastermind of the mayhem. The judge slowly started to remove the documents, incomplete financial records with suspicious entries, images of clandestine meetings, and a string of text messages sounding like a betrayal for the sake of drama. The pictures took moments Gwen had only imagined but never had evidence of individuals she trusted speaking behind closed doors, sanctioning transactions with no accountability, steering events for their advantage. The smug smile of the opposing attorney was starting to crumble. He had come into the courtroom anticipating a simple cross-examination, confident that he could trap Gwen with the files in his hands. Now he was hesitant, relegated to the backpedaling position as the judge silently scrutinized the documents. The air was thick with tension, almost choking. Everyone in the room felt it. This was no routine courtroom hearing. Gwen stood up, her tone firm but laced with regulated anger. Your Honor? She turned to Cody briefly in the gallery before returning her attention. This proof shows what I have been attempting to convey. A targeted manipulation of funds and knowledge has occurred. These dealings, these messages, they do not incriminate me. They incriminate another person altogether. One who has been manipulating these actions in order to deceive the family and the court. Gasps were heard quietly all around the courtroom. Even the jury members leaned forward, their eyes wide with interest. Curiosity piqued. The courtroom was no longer just judging Gwen. It was waiting for the unveiling of a truth that would shake things up. The judge's eyebrow twitched, unconsciously giving Gwen permission to speak by keeping a neutral silence. She walked along a timeline path, tracing her fingers over photos and messages that demonstrated discrepancies in what had been told by other relatives. The harsh glare of the courtroom lights danced off the shiny photographs as she described how one person had routed funds intentionally, doctored records, and sent misleading messages, all while portraying an air of innocence. While she was talking, the defense lawyer tried to interrupt. "Objection, Your Honor," he started, but the judge held up his hand. "Sit down. Let her speak. The court requires honesty and clearness, not interrupting," he told him sternly. Gwen's heart thumped in her chest, but she went on, explaining how she had followed the discrepancies back to one person. Her tone remained steady, however, even with the adrenaline pumping in her body making each word feel charged. She indicated a string of text messages on a printed paper. "These messages obviously indicate coordination and manipulation. See the timestamps, those overlap with unauthorized transactions. I did not take those actions, nor did I profit from them, but the pattern is clear." The courtroom was quiet, except for the muted scratching of scribbling by the court reporter. The normally unreadable face of Cody softened briefly as he took in the evidence. Gwen had a fleeting sense of hope. The truth that she had dreaded staying hidden was now out in the open for all to see. The defense lawyer, however, was not prepared to give up. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, and tried to spin the story around. "Miss Brown, you want the court to assume that you had no knowledge of these actions, that you were in no way complicit." Gwen spun around to confront him completely, her eyes piercing and unblinking. "Yes, I expect the court to realize that I was misled, manipulated, and used as a scapegoat. The evidence will not lie. I have nothing to hide, and I am here to make certain that the person really responsible is held accountable." The judge nodded slowly, recognizing the gravity of her words. He waved toward the documents laid out on his desk. "These bits of evidence are significant, Miss Brown. The court will study them exhaustively, but your testimony coincides with the documentation in a manner that cannot be dismissed." Whispers circulated in the courtroom. Members of the jury looked at one another, their faces a combination of shock and curiosity. The tension was palpable, as if the room itself knew something significant was happening, a moment that would alter the direction of the entire case. Then came the moment that no one foresaw. One of the photos slipped from the pile, showing an unmistakable scene. A person Gwen had trusted most, one who had always seemed loyal, was in a compromising position, patently engineering the deceit that had trapped the family. Gasps followed, this time louder. Even the opposing lawyer stumbled, his assurance wavering as he comprehended the significance of what had been revealed. Cody's countenance as well changed from worry to astonishment. Gwen's heart pounded so hard she worried it would explode in her chest. But in that instant, an odd clarity overwhelmed her. She had dreaded this confrontation, dreaded exposure, dreaded the judgment of those she loved, but now she saw the strength of truth. She could not let the lies and manipulation go on any longer. She needed to stand firm, to speak fearlessly, and to face the betrayal itself. "Your Honor," Gwen stated, her tone now filled with certainty. "This photo, together with the accompanying messages and transactions, clearly indicates who has been responsible for these activities. It is not me. I have been open and cooperative throughout. I request the court to take these findings seriously, as they will identify the real offender and bring equity to these proceedings." There was a thick silence. The judge's eyes narrowed in consideration, reviewing the documents once again. The opposing lawyer for the first time seemed really unsure, as if seeing his well-laid plans fall apart when confronted with Gwen's testimony. The courtroom was changed. What started as a hearing into Gwen's integrity had evolved into an inquiry into secret betrayals, a snare of deceit that promised to bring down the very foundation of the family's trust. Everyone there knew it. The game had grown way beyond a simple monetary issue. Gwen let out a slow breath, a sense of relief and tension interspersed. She had uncovered the first piece of truth, but she was certain the surprises were yet to begin. The evidence was strong, but the court would take time to absorb it completely. The next several steps would either seal her vindication or introduce another episode of suspense and turmoil. When the session came to a close, Gwen walked back to her chair. Her muscles were spent, but her brain was active. The tide had turned, and she'd been instrumental in its turning. Cameras recorded each faint gesture, the flash of feeling in her eyes, the defiant set of her chin, the unbreakable resolve in her stance. Outside of court, rumors spread quickly in the media. Headlines would soon be screaming of betrayal, deceit, and astonishing secrets within the Brown family. Gwen was aware that the path before her was still fraught with danger, but she had set the first vital steps on the path to revealing the secret truth. And for the first time in weeks, she gave herself a small, subdued smile. The truth came at last, and justice was in sight. The courtroom was still. Each set of eyes appeared fixed on Gwen Brown as she stood again, tense in body but firm in voice. The papers, photos, and text messages she had laid before them only minutes before had disturbed them all. The burden of the truth weighed heavily in the air, and Gwen felt the ferocity bearing down on her from every direction. She breathed deeply, letting the peace she had struggled so to preserve envelop her. Today was no longer merely about protecting herself. It was about speaking the truth that must be spoken, uncovering the secret betrayals, and seeking out justice. Her heart raced, but she brought it under control, selecting her words slowly, each syllable calculated and precise. "Your Honor," Gwen started, speaking loudly throughout the courtroom. "I stand here not to hide, not to defend lies but to speak the truth." She glanced around the room, her eyes lingering briefly on Cody, who watched her with a wary and supporting look. "For months I have seen as trust was shattered, as lies crept stealthily into our lives and undermined the very foundation of our family." Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she did not let them fall. Instead, she let them stoke the fire of her words. "I trusted individuals who I believed were loyal. I believed in honesty, integrity, in family ties. But someone took that trust and used it against me. Someone staged these events for their own ends, controlling my choices, my actions, and even my reputation." The jury listened, enthralled. The smug smile of the opposing attorney had vanished entirely, replaced by a furrowed brow. He had expected an ordinary cross-examination, hoping to reveal Gwen's alleged negligence. What he got was a woman who testified clearly, boldly, and irrefutably. Gwen took a deep breath, mustering the courage to go on. "I want everyone here to know this is not merely about lost funds or records. It is loyalty, trust, and honesty. It is knowing who you can count on and who will betray that trust for their own benefit." Her voice broke a little, but she continued, allowing the emotion to ring true. "I am here to ensure the truth is revealed, however hard it is to swallow." The judge, always calm, listened carefully, sometimes scribbling notes. The courtroom hung in its collective breath, waiting with bated breath for Gwen's every utterance. Even Cody, who didn't often display emotion in that arena, had a clear tightening of his jaw and a flicker of tears in his eyes. She moved slowly towards the evidence table, indicating the photographs and messages she had shown before. "Carefully observe these messages. They reveal coordination, planning, and calculated deceit. Each transaction, each message, each choice was manipulated to bring confusion and mislead not only me, but the entire family." There was a muted whisper that went around the courtroom. Individuals glanced at each other, obviously moved by the seriousness of the revelation. Gwen experienced a rush of resolve. She had been discredited, questioned, and even accused. But today she was taking back the control. She was not merely a witness, she was the voice of fact. Her voice deepened, became more determined. "I have encountered fear, betrayal, and doubt, but I have also encountered the strength to confront those things. I am here to make sure that the individual who is actually at fault is brought to justice, and that those who have been misled no longer are." Justice is not punishment, it's about laying bare the truth and providing all concerned with the clarity they are owed. The opposing lawyer attempted again to interrupt, his tone biting. "Objection, speculation." The judge held up a firm hand. "Objection overruled, Miss Brown is testifying based on evidence and experience. Let her speak." Gwen nodded, keeping her cool. She looked around the room once more, meeting the gaze of the jury. "You may not have all the information yet, but I assure you that the truth is here. It is in these records, these communications, and in my own testimony. I have been truthful right from the start, and I will keep being truthful until the truth is told in full." Her words were suspended in the air, hanging there and almost deafening to the silence that ensued. All the people in the courtroom experienced the weight of what she was stating. The tension was palpable, like the room itself understood the moment's importance. Then she told a personal anecdote, a time she had trusted someone with her whole heart, only to later discover she had been duped. She spoke in a softer tone, with an air of sadness, but she didn't falter. I learned the hardest way that trust can be manipulated, and that sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who keep the darkest secrets. But today, I refuse to let those secrets remain hidden any longer. The jurors inched forward, fully engaged. Even the opposing counsel couldn't conceal his discomfort. He had anticipated a hesitant, nervous witness, an easy witness to shoot down. Instead, he was confronting a woman who was taking over the courtroom, ripping apart the lies, and dictating the narrative with strength and integrity. Gwen's eyes went back to Cody. She could sense the pride in his eyes, the silent understanding that she had stood by what was right. She knew that whatever came next, she had been strong, resilient, and totally devoted to the truth. She ended her testimony with a strong, unequivocal statement, "I will not be a pawn in someone else's game. I am here to lay out the truth, to defend my family, and to make sure that justice is served." The cover-up ends here, and the real story begins now. A solemn silence ensued. The judge scrutinized her closely, as though measuring the entire weight of what she had said. The opposing attorney leaned back, visibly shaken and unsure. The jury looked at one another, absorbing what they had all just seen. The courtroom, a land of judgment and stress, now felt like the platform for a truth that could no longer be denied. For Gwen, there was such a huge emotional price, yet such a huge relief. She had testified truthfully, overcome the fear, and given a witness that could not be easily discredited. The stage was now set for the last twists, and the final reveal, this moment that would decide the fate of the case, and reveal the extent of the deception within the family. As she took her seat, the cameras caught everything, the faint shaking of her hands, the blaze in her eyes, the serene determination that had overtaken her previous terror. Gwen understood that what lay ahead would be pivotal. The final showdown, the final surprise, and the tying up of the suspense that had held the courtroom hostage since the very start. The courtroom was charged, nearly intolerably so. Everyone in the room held their breath, anticipating the next shock, the instant when the truth would suddenly resolve into full consciousness. Gwen Brown sat rigidly, the fear plastered across her face, earlier replaced with cold resolve. She was aware that what was going to be aired had the potential to change everything, not for her alone, but for the entire Brown family. The judge clutched the fat envelope responsible for so much commotion. He cautiously pulled out one final photo, displaying it for all to witness. Silence descended like a dense curtain. The picture was irrefutable. It depicted someone Gwen had trusted utterly masterminding the hoax, maneuvering transactions, and lying to those around them. Gasps were heard all around the courtroom. Cody's face went pale with shock, and his fists clenched as he struggled to comprehend the betrayal. The smirk of the opposing attorney had disappeared altogether, replaced by shock. The picture, in conjunction with messages and documents she had already shown, was an account nobody could deny. Gwen's emotions ran the gamut: fury, relief, and a strange sense of vindication. She had dreaded this encounter, dreaded that the truth would never come out, but now the puzzle was falling into place. "Your Honor," she asserted, her voice firm but ringing with passion, "this picture, together with all corroborating evidence, validates what I have been maintaining all along. I am innocent. I have been misled, manipulated, and exploited as a pawn in a plot to ruin my reputation." The judge nodded slowly, respecting the seriousness of the moment. He turned to the opposing attorney. "It looks like the evidence is self-explanatory. The court will have to delve into these new revelations deeply." The opposing attorney's confidence had fully broken. He fumbled through his papers awkwardly, not knowing what to say. He had expected to hold the reins, to paint Gwen as negligent or in cahoots, but instead, the truth had turned the situation on its head. Gwen's voice resonated in the courtroom once more, steady. "This is not just about money, or papers, or technicalities of the law. It's about trust. integrity, and honesty. It's about uncovering those who remain behind lies, who play on others for selfish motives. Today, the truth has been unearthed, and justice cannot help but ensue. The jury leaned forward, obviously entranced. Each piece of evidence, each statement Gwen had made, had created a rich tapestry of betrayal and manipulation. There was no longer any question. She had been open, honest, and unshaken by adversity. And then, the surprise coup de grace. The judge announced that the individual featured in the photo was already being investigated for other matters of fraud. This news stunned the courtroom even more. It wasn't merely an individual betrayal. It was part of a larger scheme, one that had victimized several members of the family and possibly even third parties. Cody's expression was a combination of heartbreak and relief. He had been taken aback by the news, but now he knew who was at fault and who had acted in good faith. Gwen cast him a glance and nodded reassuringly. Once they had ridden out the storm together, and they could rebuild trust together. Gwen's last words in court rang out to all who were there. I have encountered fear, betrayal, and manipulation, but I've also encountered courage, truth, and justice. Today the lies have been told, and the true tale begins. I hope that by standing and telling the truth, I can encourage others to do likewise, and prevent additional deception from doing damage to our family. An undertone of whispers swept the courtroom. Cameras caught every expression, the shock, the awe, the respect. The media would have a field day. But for Gwen, the key was that the truth had at last been spoken, and justice could see its chance to reign. As the session ended, Gwen and Cody departed in unison. The burst of cameras and chatter of reporters swirled around them, but Gwen felt a tranquility she hadn't experienced in months. The weight of suspicion, the dark shadow of doubt, had been lifted. The true perpetrator had been revealed, and the family could start the gradual healing process. Outside the courthouse, reporters jostled for remarks. Gwen had words with quiet assurance. The truth matters. Integrity matters. And today the truth has come to light. That is all I will say for now. She looked back at the courthouse for the last time. Inhaling deeply, she had confronted the greatest challenge of her life, and come out stronger, braver, and more resolved than ever. The journey ahead would continue to have challenges, but the tempest had broken, and she was ready for whatever lay ahead. In that instant, Gwen understood something profound. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was to stand tall and be truthful, even when fear tried to stop you. And today she had done exactly that.